Welcome to episode 13 of the Backseat Fighter Podcast. I am so excited to be back. I know we had a bit of a break. I'm back home celebrating Christmas in London with the family. I hope everyone's had a great holiday. I'm just very excited to get back to the podcast and talk about what we've got today, which is a Christmas wish list from myself about what I want to see from the UFC in 2025, the big fights and the names I need to see step into the octagon. And let's just get straight into the episode today. But before we get into the episode, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone on the views and the support on the most recent content, especially the short form clips. But 94% of you are not subscribed, man. What are we doing? Subscribe, join the family. And I'm just happy to grow this community and grow MMA media more healthily than ever before. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get straight back to the episode. So I'm talking about a wish list, a Christmas wish list for UFC in terms of 2025. Obviously, we know there's some huge fights that are supposed to be happening this year. Finally, we may get the matchup between Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall. And, you know, I'm not going to necessarily include that in my wish list just because I think it's a fight that is going to happen. The ones I want to talk about are a bit more hypothetical. We don't know if they're going to be booked, and they're just kind of some dream matchups that I want to see personally. But I am going to touch a little bit on Jon Jones versus Aspinall. I know we spent a lot of episodes in the first couple weeks of this podcast talking about Jon Jones and Aspinall. But the fact of the matter is, I think we are going to see that. I think it's an incredible fight to make. I think it's probably the biggest fight in heavyweight history, just because you've got two champions, obviously Tom being the interim champion, Jon being the undisputed, although it's the most disputed undisputed I've seen in terms of the fan base's reaction to a champion. But that makes it a huge fight in itself, right? You got two titles on the line in the same division. And then obviously, I believe that Tom Aspinall is probably the biggest threat we've ever seen to Jon Jones for a number of factors, right? For a number of reasons. The first being that Jon Jones is 37 years old. Yes, he looked amazing against Stipe Miocic. Yes, he looked like he was still, athletic. He still had his eyes about him, still had his timing, his obviously insane offensive arsenal, his ability to control distance and range, still like he was doing back in the day. And obviously, I feel like he's even filled out more into this heavyweight frame, whereas when we saw him against Cyril Gane, I think he came in at around 248 pounds. He looked a little bit overweight, and now he looks like he's in, a proper, good, lean heavyweight body, heavyweight frame. But, it cannot be denied that Tom Aspinall offers Jon Jones something that we've never seen him have to get in there with, in terms of his opponents. Tom Aspinall is a huge man. He's way bigger than Jon Jones. He might be faster than Jon Jones, and he has an all-around game. Now, obviously, we've seen Tom Aspinall have the shortest average cage time in UFC history. This is an absolute monster in terms of knockout ability and finishing in terms of submissions. But that's exactly what I wanted to get to on that note. He's so well-rounded. And, I think Jon's going to have to struggle a little bit more with Tom, at least in theory, than he would have had to with other opponents. Now, I'm not saying Jon can't win, but I do believe Tom Aspinall probably has my vote, not just because I'm English, not because I want to see an English heavyweight champion, but I do believe that Tom Aspinall's just talent, ability, and honestly, he's developed such good confidence and IQ in there that I feel like he's now ready. Maybe Jon Jones actually kind of hesitating. Notifications, how rude of me. I think Jon Jones kind of, waiting around or wanting to fight Stipe Miocic first kind of gave Tom that more time to go out and beat another top guy like Curtis Blades and do it so dominantly, whereas now Tom Aspinall's confidence is at an all-time high and ready to go against probably the greatest of all time in our sport ever of all times. So, I think probably now we're looking to see that fight. And it's going to be a very, very competitive fight. I would love to know what you guys think. Who's going to win that fight? And that's going to be, kind of a honourable mention in terms of wish list because it is going to happen. Another honourable mention I just wanted to make clear just before I start my actual list is Charles Oliveira fighting for the title. So this is kind of also a semi-confirmed fight. So I'm not going to put it on my wish list, although it is obviously up there at the top of my priorities, as Charles Oliveira is one of the most entertaining and greatest fighters we've ever seen step inside the octagon. And for him to have worked himself back to a title shot after that kind of crippling defeat in terms of his probably own emotions, all the time he probably put into that Arman Sarukian training camp to go into that fight, almost get the submission twice. and then to not eventually come out on top on the judges' scorecards. I think it's just such an incredible story now that he's returned to this position to maybe perhaps get a rematch against, Islam Makhachev or Arman Tsarukyan. So he's already fought two of these guys. He's unfortunately lost to both of them for Charles. And, I'm very, very excited to see him get back in there. I think Charles obviously came into that last fight with Michael Chan injured. And perhaps that's why we didn't see, the finishing ability that we usually would. Now, he fought excellently. He dominated the entire fight. But I'm just very excited to see Charles Oliveira get back in there. I think he's probably, since McGregor left, one of the biggest stars in the sport. And, I'm just so happy that we get to see him. I think he's a star, and I think he can present real problems to either of these two guys, although he's lost to both. I mean, obviously, the way Islam Makhachev beat him was quite dominant. It was startling. In fact, when he got that Darce choke, I believe it was it a Darce choke or was it a head and arm choke? Let me know, guys. Or was it an arm triangle? You guys let me know. I've forgotten right now. I can picture in my head, but I'm stumbling over my words. But, that was terrifying. That made Islam Makhachev, really great. That probably is his best win, in my opinion, just because he was able to absolutely dominate one of the greatest in this sport, in Charles Oliveira. And then against Arman Tsarukyan, it was a much more competitive fight in terms of the fact that it went all 3 rounds, in terms of the fact that Charles Oliveira debatably won 2 of the rounds, although on the judges' scorecards he won 1. I believe Arman Tsarukyan deserved to win that fight. But let me just get back to the point, is that I think we are going to see Charles Oliveira in a title fight very soon. And that's very exciting for not just Charles Oliveira fans, but UFC fans, because those are the type of fighters that really put UFC on that pedestal, put it on the mountaintop in terms of MMA, in terms of promotions, in terms of opportunities for fighters. You need people like Charles Oliveira who can give inspiration to the next generation. This is a guy that I think waited 11 years or something before he got his first title shot. 11 years in the UFC before a title shot. So incredible story. And I'm just very happy for Charles Oliveira that he's getting that opportunity. But let's get into what I really wanted to talk about, which is my wish list for 2025. I mean, we've got an incredible year of UFC coming up, and we've seen some big names not compete in a while. We've seen some new talents, new contenders emerging in these divisions. And we've seen some, veterans of the game kind of, what's the word? Kind of take their time and wait to come back and observe what's going on. So with that being said, the first fight I need to see in 2025 is Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, where do I start with this one? I'm going to start with Joaquin Buckley. I think he's been so active and so dominant that he deserves this. 6-fight win streak now in the welterweight division after coming down from middleweight, where I believe he was just over 500 in terms of a record. I think he was 8-7 or something like that, to that effect. This was not a title contender at middleweight. This was not an elite fighter at middleweight. Elite fighter in terms of the rankings at middleweight. He's obviously an elite fighter just for being in the UFC. But Joaquin Buckley now at welterweight is just an absolute problem. You think about that fight with Ruzi Boyev, where I spoke about in that analysis before Colby Covington, his ability to show his development as a martial artist, to develop that IQ in the middle of the fight, to be able to fight against a hugely bigger man, taller, close the range, crash the void and get across to your man, wrestle, mix in the takedowns. I mean, it was a really beautiful performance that gave me so much confidence that he was going to win against Colby Covington. And then, obviously that performance against Wonderboy, Vicente Luque, and then against Colby Covington. I mean, look at the names I'm saying. To go in there against Colby Covington, who admittedly came in on short notice, but to be able to absolutely dominate him like that, get the cut, keep firing the jab towards that cut, making sure the cut kept getting worse, it was still bothering Colby, to then even, be safe and be able to get up from the bottom on the takedowns. I just thought he showed again that he was really, really ready to be a title contender. And although, the title is kind of tied up right now with Bilal Muhammad, the great Bilal Muhammad, and Shavkat Rakhmonov, who came off that win against Ian Gary, who was supposed to be Joaquin Buckley's opponent. I think that's an opportunity for Joaquin Buckley now to fight a legend and to get in to that number one contender spot. And I believe that should be against Kamaru, the Nigerian Nightmare Usman, one of the greatest of all time. It's probably the first or second greatest welterweight of all time. I think Kamaru Usman's been out nursing some injuries, trying to get back to full health, trying to have one really good, genuine run at the title again and not kind of sell himself short by coming into these fights injured. And I think that'd be a great fight for Joaquin Buckley to establish himself if he could get the win. Now, the reason I say Kamaru Usman and maybe not somebody else is because Kamaru has incredible, name value. Joaquin Buckley called him out after his win against Colby Covington. But I do believe that a lot of people have counted Kamaru Usman out of being, a top 5 welterweight. I mean, people acting like he's washed. People acted like they didn't see that fight against Khamzat Chimaev. Like they didn't see before he got head kicked that performance against Leon Edwards. And, in the third fight, in the trilogy fight, yes, he lost. I went to that fight. I was here in London. I watched that fight. But to say that Kamaru Usman is done is almost sacrilegious if you're a UFC fan. You know what I mean? Because not only has this guy got enough credit in the bank through what he's done in the UFC, the run he went on, lapping the division twice, brutal knockouts, dominant performances, 5-round maulings of people. Remember what he did to Tyron Woodley, for goodness sake. But more than anything, this is a guy who still has it and it can still really present problems for Joaquin Buckley because, in my opinion, Kamaru is a better wrestler than Colby Covington. And even if he's not, even if in your opinion, prime to prime, Colby Covington was a better wrestler, Kamaru Usman's got the athleticism, size, strength to match Joaquin Buckley because Joaquin Buckley is an athlete of athletes. I mean, remember that kick where the guy caught it? Sorry, I'm forgetting the name. His opponent caught it. He spins on a dime, absolutely throws a kick to the face, knocks him out cold. One of the best knockouts you've ever seen. And I just think he looks even better at welterweight in terms of Joaquin Buckley. So I do believe that Kamaru Usman definitely has a chance in that fight. And I may even take Kamaru Usman in that fight just because I have so much respect for his capabilities, abilities, and what he's done in the sport, his legacy. And his just position as one of the best of all time. Sorry. But that is definitely number one on my Christmas wish list. I know that's not probably the most high profile names, but outside of huge names in terms of like Conor McGregor's, Jon Jones's, that's probably my favorite fight that I want to see coming in 2025. So the next fight I need to see in 2025 is Max Holloway fight the winner of Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker. Now this is kind of contingent on a rumor that's going around. I mean, but Justin Gaethje kind of all but confirmed that he is going to fight Dan Hooker, I think in around March, something like that, which would give Max Holloway enough time to kind of recover from that big knockout loss to Ilia Topuria and kind of matches up perfectly in terms of that timing. Now, there's two options there, obviously. You could get the rematch of UFC 300, probably the craziest highlight of all time, when Max Holloway knocked out Justin Gaethje. Excuse me. And then if, Dan Hooker is able to get such a huge win, if he doesn't necessarily want to fight, or doesn't get the opportunity to fight for a title off a win against Justin Gaethje, you could do the BMF fight between Max Holloway and Dan Hooker in the lightweight division. And I think it's such an interesting prospect for Max because, after he came back to lightweight against Justin Gaethje, he looked athletic. He looked like he had filled out that frame and was more suited for that weight class. And for him to come off that super high, highest of highs against Justin Gaethje in terms of that win, to then have to do the cut again. And obviously he was fighting for championship against Ilia Topuria. So I know he wasn't ever questioning taking that fight. But to go up to lightweight and spend that time working your body, spend that time adjusting your body to that new size, that frame, to keep athletic and keep, to add more muscle, but keep athletic, to then have to cut back down to featherweight, I think it was probably more difficult than a lot of us realize. It probably had some effects on why he wasn't able to take that shot as well as probably we've seen him in the past. Now, maybe it's because he's never fought somebody who can absolutely eliminate people from his life, like Ilia Topuria. But he showed an immense ability, in my opinion, in lightweight in terms of that second time, against Dustin Poirier when he didn't really get his body prepared to be in that lightweight division. It looked like he shouldn't have been there. It looked like he was just a fat featherweight. And he said that himself. But against Justin Gaethje, he just looked like he was in elite shape. He looked like everything was on. Last time we saw him, the spinning back kicks that broke the nose of Justin Gaethje, his ability to stay fast, even though he added some size. And, his boxing just looked crisp. We know Max Holloway is as one of the best boxers in this entire promotion and in terms of MMA in general. And if I could see him fight against Justin Gaethje again, I think that would be brilliant. Now, do I think the fight would go exactly the same way? You never know, because Justin Gaethje is one of those people that can come out and absolutely dominate. Remember that Poirier rematch? I definitely thought Poirier was going to win, and you see Justin Gaethje come out with a beautiful Leon-esque head kick that put Dustin Poirier's lights out. I really, really believe that would be an incredible fight to see again. I think that's always going to be an entertaining fight. It's kind of like a banker, 100% that's always going to be entertaining. But that's a similar case, I believe, if Dan Hooker is able to get past Justin Gaethje and, then obviously Charles Oliveira, as we spoke about at the start of the podcast, has to go and fight for the title. That probably leaves some time for Dan Hooker to then maybe fight Max Holloway, and the winner of that gets the title shot. I think that's the best way to do it. If I'm the UFC, that's what I would do. Not only does that increase, generate some revenue for them in terms of, big pay-per-view numbers, which would help them in their negotiations for a new deal, a new media deal. But I think for the fans, that is just such an entertaining prospect, and you can't really go wrong. So if I'm the UFC, that's how I plan. I kind of secure with both of those two options. And unless, one of those two were to retire after that fight, because, I'm just going to mention on Justin Gaethje for a second. Like, he's an absolute legend of this sport, obviously. He's been in wars, probably the most entertaining fighter, or one of the most entertaining fighters on the roster. But he's taken a lot of damage throughout his career, right? And we can't really overlook that, especially after that Max Holloway fight. And now it's crazy that I'm saying he should get back in there with Max Holloway after that. Because what happened in that Max Holloway fight, for me, was one of the greatest watches and most difficult watches as well, because obviously you're enjoying what Max Holloway was able to do. You're enjoying how entertaining, how elite the expression of martial arts was in that fight. But then you're seeing a guy get pieced up for, 4.5 rounds, more than that, the entire fight, basically 24 minutes, 50 seconds. He's getting pieced up. He's taking a lot of hits and big ones at that, broken his nose. He'd really, really gone through it. To then get slept like that in the final second, that's the type of damage that you never really recover from, right? And, is there a debate? I mean, it's a bit of a silly debate, kind of insensitive debate, but as someone who's not a neurologist, but, what's worse? Is it worse getting, in terms of brain health, is it worse getting beaten around the ring or octagon for 5 rounds, or getting, slept in a one-shot punch? Well, Justin Gaethje went through both, right? And that's why I was a bit worried about him after that fight, and I'm glad he's taken some time off. But we do have to be cognizant of that, right? That these guys do not ride scot-free. They do not ride for free. They do not play this game for free. And sometimes I hate saying play this game, because it's really not a game in that sense. These guys put it all on the line, and, things can go wrong in there. But, just on that note, I'm happy to see that Justin Gaethje kind of feeling better, wants to get back in there in terms of his own choices and decisions. And, it would be a war against Dan Hooker as well. So, that's the type of fights Justin Gaethje gets in. That's the type of fighter he is. And, a lot of the fans should thank him for being part of that, being that guy in our sport, because there's not many left of those guys, man. The sport is getting more and more technical, and you don't see guys who just go out there and put it all on the line every single time. Like that. I mean, guys put it out all on the line every single time, but the way Justin Gaethje, we all have to admit is different. But that's my next fight that needs to be happening in 2025, and it's contingent upon a fight between Dan Hooker and Justin Gaethje. But my next fight that I need to see in 2025 is a bit of a strange one, and I don't know if people will agree with me on this one. I want to see Deveison Figueiredo versus Corey Sandhagen, the Sandman. Now, this is a really interesting fight to me, because these are two elite guys in that bantamweight division. It's probably the most stacked division inside the UFC for me. These guys' ability, their speed, their technique, their IQ, their pace in which they can fight, it really is the highest form of expression in martial arts, in mixed martial arts in the UFC, in my opinion. Because they're able to do stuff for a longer period of time that the bigger guys simply physically, biologically cannot do. So you get to see, people like Usman Nurmagomedov and Corey Sandhagen have a really competitive fight for 5 rounds. You get to see someone like Deveison Figueiredo go up against Peter Yan for 5 rounds. And although these guys came out on the losing ends of both of those fights, they looked incredible. And I've looked like Corey Sandhagen, for me, looked, kind of the best he ever has. The only difference was that Usman Nurmagomedov is so good with his wrestling that it kind of tired Corey out. But Corey was able to defend the wrestling. He was able to get up from the bottom, get up from the takedowns. He just wasn't able to implement his offense as efficiently in that sense because of the fatigue of having to defend the grappling. But I'm definitely, if you go ask Usman Nurmagomedov, I've seen it in some videos. He said that Corey Sandhagen was better than he thought he would be. He was surprised at how good Corey Sandhagen was able to stop his takedowns. And the fact that he had to win that fight on the feet was not something he was expecting. That just goes to show the mentality of Usman, by the way. But with Corey Sandhagen, I met him briefly in Central Park in New York during UFC 309 Fight Week. And, I didn't really say much to him other than, wow, it's great to meet you. You're a legend. Because for me, Corey Sandhagen is one of the most elite martial artists in the sport in terms of his ability to break down footage. If you go on his Instagram, if you go on his content, you'll see that he has a tremendous brain for this game. And I'm sure he's going to be a head coach in the future. The way he's able to break down fights, he's able to implement different styles. You just watch him strike. It's beautiful. And the fact that his grappling has developed in the way it has to be able to kind of defend against somebody like Usman Nurmagomedov so effectively, I think it just speaks to who he is as a fighter. And, he looks kind of big for that bantamweight division. Even though he's a bit skinny, he's really, really long and suits that division really well. Now, for Deveison, I think he was probably trying to get onto a title charge, right? This is a former champion in the 125 flyweight division, one of the greatest flyweights of all time. Obviously had that quadrilogy with Brandon Moreno, but before that was destroying people like Benavidez. I can remember his performances all the way back, and I really enjoyed analyzing his fights for UFC Macau, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think I was able to actually get that episode out. I think something went wrong. It was when I had my old laptop. Thank God for this thing, because it would take me ages to upload. Anyway, I'm ranting. But I wasn't able to get my predictions out for that one, I think. I only was able to get out the reactions. But I did predict when he was fighting Peter Yan that he would go and win. I thought he would beat Peter Yan. This is how highly I rate Deveison Figueiredo. And, I kind of spoke about the strategy I would have implemented if I was Deveison. I would have, shot for the takedown early, got Peter Yan done, made him think about the possibility of being on his back the entire time and kind of use the feints of those takedowns to go up top with the striking, which he did do. But, Peter Yan was just really, really good and was able to still win despite the implementation of the game plan and hurt Deveison multiple times in that fight. Do I think Deveison Figueiredo is done? By far not. I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. And I think this is a great fight for both guys because coming off losses in high ranking positions where they probably think, damn, that's a big step back. That's a big, roadblock obstacle in my career. I think now it gives them the opportunity to get back right into that title conversation with a win over each other. And, when you see two elite guys like that in the octagon, it's going to be an elite fight. So that's my next fight I need to see in 2025. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think that fight's even possible? Do you think Deveison Figueiredo might even go down and fight Henry Cejudo? I know there's been conversations. No. Yeah, was that what was happening? I have no idea. Anyway, I'm losing the plot over here. But yeah, I actually think Henry Cejudo might be going down to fight Pantoja. Yeah, I'm losing my mind out here, but I don't know. You guys let me know what you guys want to see. Would you want to see even Henry Cejudo versus Pantoja? Let me know. I haven't really thought about that before this video, but that's probably a possibility in terms of fighting because I don't see much of a future for Henry Cejudo in the bantamweight division, and I don't think he does for himself either. If you look at that interview he did with Khabib Nurmagomedov for the Pound for Pound podcast, he's kind of saying I think he was half joking, but he's talking to Khabib and he said your cousin Usman Nurmagomedov, he makes me not want to stay around here. I might go down and fight Pantoja. And Khabib was like, you should probably go down and fight Pantoja as well. So yeah, that's a whole different thing. But let me move on now to the next fight I need to see in 2025. And now this is a very special one to me because it involves two really cool fighters. And those fighters are Gilbert Burns and Carlos Prates. Now, where do I start with this? Gilbert Burns is one of my favorite fighters of all time. I think he when he finally made that move up to welterweight, it was kind of like the Joaquin Buckley story, you know? It just completely changed his career path as a fighter, how his perception of probably himself, but obviously from the media towards him, the fans towards him, he just became an absolute monster. And, you know, obviously got that title shot against Kamaru, whose teammate from Killcliff, very early on, wasn't able to get that win. But then comes back and still been an absolute demon fight. You know, he's fought the best of the best at this point. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting Gilbert Burns at Renzo Gracie. I'll put the picture in here. Renzo Gracie gym in New York City. And he was just one of the nicest guys ever. And I told him in that moment, you know, Hamzat fight, you won it. Like I told him, you won it, my brother. And he said, you know, a lot of people have told me that. And I genuinely think you won it. I could see obviously how the judges scored it for Hamzat, and I can see how a lot of people scored it for Hamzat. You know, it was a close fight. But these are the margins. I'm going to get into the Carlos Prates versus Gilbert Burns fight in a second, but I just wanted to mention, like, these are the margins that fighters face. You know, if that decision goes Gilbert Burns' way, is he fighting for another title shot? Does he have another title shot? Is he the champ right now? What does his career look like? You know? But Gilbert Burns, I mean, what an incredible fighter. Obviously, that win against Jorge Masvidal, I remember that one. His fight against Bilal Muhammad. I even spoke to him at Renzo about that injury he got against Bilal Muhammad. Obviously, his shoulder, and he said it was a bunch of rehab. And at that time, I think it would have been when was that? November? Maybe it was November, October. Whenever UFC 309 fight week was, I'm losing the plot. I swear to goodness gracious. You know, he said at that point he wanted to come back in February-ish because he had been dealing with some injuries that I won't get into. I don't want to talk about it. He told me, I don't know if it was confidential, but he was dealing with something. So he was saying, I'll come back in February and that's when I'm trying to target, which at that point was a really good idea. You know, Gilbert is a bit older these days. I think he's 38 or 39 years old. And for someone coming towards that part of their career in the, you know, killer of a division at welterweight, I think he probably needs to get in there sooner than later. And I think he called out Colby Covington, but I don't really want to see that fight. Although it's probably a good fight in terms of where those two are in their career, I don't know how much it does for Gilbert in terms of getting back towards that top 5, top 3, number 1 contender positions. What would be insane is him versus Carlos Prates, because Carlos Prates, we know what this guy can do. He's an absolute killer. The flying knees, the knockouts, his personality, him drinking Howler Head on the side of the cage, smoking and drinking the day of his fights, but still going out there and absolutely dominating and killing people, part of that fighting nerds team. And with Carlos Prates, the thing about him is he's so dangerous and so electrifying, and he's become such a big star that there's kind of benefits for both guys taking this fight. If Gilbert Burns can stop that hype train, get that win, you know, after coming off a loss against Sean Brady, I believe, if he can get in there with Carlos Prates, prove that he's still him, prove that he's still one of the best in this division, he can get himself right back into a title shot. Now, the thing is, if Carlos Prates can get a win over Gilbert Burns, that puts him now in a top 5 fight, you know. He should be in there with the best of the best because I think he has that talent, and it would be a great test of Carlos Prates' level at this point to see if he is ready to begin there with someone like Gilbert, or see if he's ready to, you know, kind of push on for a title in 2025. And I think that's kind of an electrifying fight that we need to see. But let me know what you guys think. I think Gilbert Burns, for me, just one of my favorite fighters. Incredible power, incredible, you know, just absolute warrior of a fighter, always ready for war. And, you know, obviously one of the greatest jiu-jitsu fighters we've ever seen inside the UFC. I think he's a 4-time jiu-jitsu world champion. So this is a guy you cannot mess with on the ground. And I think he probably looks at that Sean Brady performance. He's probably a bit disappointed by that because it didn't show the Gilbert Burns that I think is still in there. I think Gilbert Burns still has the ability. And obviously, you know, I hope to have him on this podcast one day. He's one of my favorite fighters. And, you know, that's all I can really talk about for now. But, you know, I'm very, very, very excited for 2025. I think it's going to be a great year for the UFC and just for MMA in general. What I will add, just a little addition is that, every time obviously I have a fighter on this podcast, I do want to see them go fight again. And obviously I've built some really good relationships with the guys I've had on in terms of Josh Flash on Wardy, in terms of the Professor Xavier Vines, and now Tuco Tokos most recently. And the Tuco episode got such good, engagement, not just in terms of numbers, but, just in terms of reception from people. And he was really great on the podcast. So obviously I'm hoping to see Tuco get back in there, and hopefully we can have him on before his next fight as well. And the Professor, and obviously Joshua Flash on Wardy. I would love to see actually Xavier Vines get back in there. I mean, he came off for that was such a competitive fight he had against Navarrete in Cage Warriors at 182 in San Diego. And I kind of felt for him because it was such, a good performance until he lost. He was really dominating until he lost. And I want to see the Professor get back in there. Elite fighter, can get to the UFC 100% if he can string some wins together. But yeah, that's it for my wish list. I just wanted to say, thank you so much for the support so far. Subscribe if you are new to the channel. We've only got 6% of the people watching the content right now are subscribed, and we're getting views. So let's subscribe, people. What are we doing? I know it's 2025, it's almost 2024. It's almost 2025. It's all recommended and algorithms, stuff like that. But I'm trying to build a community here, and I'd love for you guys to join, because I'm trying to do it in a healthy way where, I'm not trying to sensationalize everything. The only thing I sensationalize is how cool and how special these fighters are. But I'm trying to change sports media. This needs to be a space where we can actually have discussions that are meaningful, that are not just, for clicks and views and, kind of hot takey the whole time. And if you do have a hot take, explain it. Be able to explain it with logic, reasoning, and understanding of why people may perceive it as such. But yeah, this has been a fantastic episode. I know it's probably going to be a short one, but I just wanted to get something out for, Boxing Day, for Christmas, for New Year's. But we've got some big things on the way. I've made some great connections, and you never know. I'm going to have some big fighters on this show coming in the future. And I'm working towards that, and we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep pushing forward. I hope you guys like the kind of do setup with the laptop here, with the YouTube page over there. And obviously, I should actually mention very quickly what I have here. This is a UFC 232 poster signed by everyone that was on the card. And it was the rematch between Jon Jones and Gustafsson. And it was the fight between Cyborg and Amanda Nunes. And I remember watching this. I was in the UK at the time. I think I don't know how old I would have been, maybe 16, 15, something like that. And I stayed up all night to watch it, because obviously the pay-per-views here are on at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. And yeah, I remember screaming, supporting Jon Jones at the time and Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes, I remember that fight was insane because she was counted out so viciously because Cyborg was so scary. It was at 145 and they just went to absolute war. And I'm just kind of proud as not only a person who now is working in media and wants to be a real force for good in this space and change the space, but as someone who's a fan of the sport, to have possibly the greatest of all time in the men's category. I have Jon Jones' signature, and the greatest of all time in the women's to have her signature as well. Plus all these incredible fighters. I think you got Miesha Tate on there. I think you got is it Miesha Tate? I don't even know. But I got Cyborg on there. Got some incredible fighters on there, and I'm just extremely grateful that I was able to get this, and I still have it to this day. And I don't have it in New York at the moment, but I brought it out for this episode, and I hope you guys have seen that. Don't worry about the light, you can see. But thank you guys so much for all the support on the most recent episodes, and I will get back to you as soon as possible, maybe even within the next couple of days, for another episode 14 of the Backseat Fighter Podcast. Follow me on TikTok, on Instagram. Keep going on the YouTube. Subscribe, man. Let's go. And let's just keep building this community healthily. Thank you for watching. I've been Charlie Benz. Goodbye.